Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, give us a moment to let people in from the waiting room. I'll get us started with some quick announcements as we dive into our program. I think we're getting into the pre-Christmas lulls here, so we might have a smaller group today, which will give us a chance to have a little bit more of a conversation. But let me start right away by saying that as you're coming in, please feel free to rename yourself with the state or the city you're from, the agency that you come from, or any other information that you'd like others to know about you. One of the great things here is we're engaged in peer-to-peer learning, sharing with one another, and so people love to know who is here. You can also, as some of you are already doing, use the chat to introduce yourselves to one another. And tell us where you're from, and also please to share your expertise and your experience. I see people here who I know have background and expertise on this topic, and we'd love to hear from you at the same time. If you have questions, though, for our presenters today, whom I'll introduce in just a second, you will see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So it helps us to organize the discussion if you at least just give us some idea of what you want to ask about in due course. And then we can use that to call on you when it comes time for the group conversation that we're going to have. We are recording for note-taking purposes, and so if we can share this workshop afterwards for people, Zoom will have asked you to consent to that, but I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Okay, with that said, I think that's all of the housekeeping. As I go ahead and tell you more about the substance for today, maybe we go ahead and just launch the survey. We have just quick 3 questions, I think, that we want to ask you to just ask why you're here. It sometimes helps our presenters to understand what people's interests are, what you're excited about, a little bit about you. So if you take a second to just answer those 3 questions, we'll share those out for everybody to see in just a moment. My name is Beth Novak. I am one of the founders of Innovate US. I'm also the Chief AI Strategist for the state of New Jersey. I see a number of people here from New Jersey. Yay! And this is the 10th in our series on using AI to help foster more productive and more efficient public engagement. The series is co-hosted both by Innovate US and the Governance Lab, as well as our partners at Harvard University, the Allen Lab for Democracy Renovation. They have been helping to organize and to moderate the sessions, and we'll share with you in a minute some details about an upcoming session that they are actually moderating next week. Let's see. Last thing I think on the announcements front is that this session is also has real-time translation, that is AI translation, but hopefully better that than nothing. So we're going to post some instructions in the chat about how to watch this in other languages. I think the medium is the message. We're here to talk about multilingual engagement. So we offer multilingual engagement here. You can click on, I think it's the captions button on the right for me. It says show captions, but we will put those instructions in the chat. And I will just ask if you can, I'm actually not a host, so if one of the hosts could share the results from the survey, we can close that for folks. And then thank you very much. Just give everybody a chance to take a look at why people are here and what their interests are as we go ahead and move into the session. So I've done a lot of announcements. So let me just say who's here. Ruthie Nachmani is a product lead at the Office of Innovation for the state of New Jersey. She is joined by Sofia Bosch Gomez, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Art and Design and also a fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. And as you'll hear in a moment, the lead on a project called AIEP, which I won't spoil any of her thunder by telling you more about it. I'm going to let her tell you about that work, working with Spanish-speaking and multilingual communities to build AI in California. Ruthie's going to tell you about some of the statewide multilingual engagement programs in New Jersey. And Anirudh Dinesh is a research fellow at the Governance Lab. He also does work with the state of New Jersey on some of the projects there, and he's going to join in sharing more from the technical side about how these projects and others have been run. But our goal is collectively to try to advance the discussion about how we can use AI to support more real-time translation, more culturally responsive development of services, more public engagement from minoritized communities and non-English speaking communities in all the work that we do, whether it's service delivery or policy making across government. So I'm going to start with short presentations from our speakers. We're going to move into a sort of moderated Q&A, and we're going to open it up to all of you to chime in with your questions. Again, please feel free to use the Q&A button to indicate what you would like to talk about, and then it will make it easier for me to call on you later or to bring those questions into the conversation. And with that said, let me hand it off to Ruthie to get us started.
Thank you, Beth. Can you all hear me okay? Great, perfect. Thanks. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to talk about how we are using AI for public engagement and co-creation with multilingual communities in New Jersey. And I see a lot of folks from New Jersey on the call, from other states. I'm going to talk through this work, but and talk about how we approach it to the New Jersey Office of Innovation. But I just want to call out this as a collaboration with so many folks in New Jersey and inspired by work we see from digital service teams across the entire United States. So happy to have everyone here and to learn from you all. I'll talk a lot about the principles that guide our work. So number one, we try to make it really easy for people to tell us what's not working in their own words. Two, we try to empower multilingual team members and community partners who are regularly explaining complicated concepts, especially related to government services, to members of the public. And they already practice using explaining these terms in easy to use language. So they are a great resource for us to partner with here, ensuring that we keep a human in the loop, test and learn quickly with members of the public and with the staff and partners. And the way we look at AI here is that AI can be a powerful tool we can use to scale human-centered principles for multilingual content creation and public engagement. So I'll talk through two examples for how we do this in New Jersey. The first case study will be related to unemployment insurance and glossaries and guides we created to scale the work we're doing for translation. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we capture public feedback and use AI to analyze that. So case study one, in 2024, we released a new unemployment insurance application, which drove a lot of impact for residents. But one of the ones that we are most excited about is that we achieved 100% completion time parity for English and Spanish speakers applying for unemployment insurance in New Jersey. And you can see some of the impact here. In terms of the language access piece specifically, this involved close collaboration over 8 months between a really diverse team of folks on our side, like bilingual content creatives, staff members, community partners, residents. So again, we really had the opportunity to work very closely to create easy to understand plain language English and Spanish unemployment insurance application terminology and think through design and so on. And I'll talk about how we are now looking at using AI to scale this work. So after we created the new unemployment insurance application, we developed a glossary of plain language English and Spanish terms, common terms that people use for benefits access. We developed this at first for unemployment insurance and English and Spanish, and then along with partnership with U.S. Digital Response, we developed other data sets for common terms such as Haitian Creole and for other benefits programs. Two, we prompt generative AI chatbots. Specifically, this is the New Jersey AI Assistant, which is basically our state-run version of ChatGPT or a similar type of tool. We upload these guides and we prompt our AI assistant to help us generate translations that capture these human-centered terms that we had in the guides. And as you can see here, we've also evaluated how these perform versus an untrained LLM, Google Translate. And so we were really excited to see that the trained LLM is people ranked it as almost as good as a human generated translations. This is really a great way for us to generate first drafts. And then step three, we open source these guides and templates, extended to other languages and benefits programs, like I mentioned, and share these out. So these are all available online. I'll link to these at the end. But this is one way that we were really excited about, kind of spending a lot of time and really kind of taking the resources to create these glossaries and guides, and then explore how we can use those to prompt AI to help us scale that effort across many more sites in the state and many more programs and more languages as well. I'll talk about another example here. We have a simple three-question feedback widget on the footer of, say, state sites. We've also open sourced this, so this is available for anyone to use. We asked people if you found what you were looking for. You could say yes, no. You can also share free text feedback in your email. You can see this in action here, just to kind of walk through that a little bit more. So again, this is very simple to fill out, but very powerful. We have this now on 13 New Jersey government sites, including newjersey.gov homepage. This makes up 18% of state traffic. And over the last 2.5 years, we've collected nearly 500,000 public ratings, over 90,000 comments, over 20,000 emails from the public. So this really gives us a snapshot of how we're doing critically in terms of language access, hearing pain points in someone's own words. We get a lot of comments both in English and in Spanish and other languages as well, but especially English and Spanish. And it also helps us get fast feedback loops after we make improvements. Again, there's tremendous insight in this feedback to continue the theme of unemployment insurance. We had this on the bottom of our claim status page on unemployment. This is an example of some of the feedback we got. And by incorporating this feedback, we were able to kind of, if you see this graph, get this jump in people finding what they were looking for on this page. So again, this feedback loop is really powerful. But again, there's a lot of feedback. And so we use generative AI to analyze this feedback at scale to make improvements to language, communication, content, technology, and overall program design. So I won't go into this in too much detail. We have a very in-depth presentation we did a few weeks ago on this, which I'll also link out. But you can see, how AI helps us, make it effective and responsible for us to collect this feedback from the public, so we can really understand the feedback, the types of feedback we're getting, and types of improvements we can make based on this. And I just have some links here. I can include these in the chat as well, but there's some language access and content design guides, the glossaries that I mentioned that you can use to prompt AI in whatever environment you're able to use generative AI in your government. The feedback widget open source code in case you want to start using that, a little bit about how we're using AI to analyze that feedback here in this talk, and a workshop we did that was a much more in-depth version of this presentation a few weeks ago with Innovate US. So please reach out. And again, this was a cross-functional effort with a number of folks at the New Jersey Department of Labor, Office of Innovation, US Digital Response, and many others. So thank you to everybody who was involved with that. And I will pass it back to Beth now. I think you're muted, Beth.
I can just jump in, given that I'm next. Perfect. So hi, everyone. Sofia Bosch Gomez from the Burn Center for Social Change and Northeastern University. Anirudh, my colleague Anirudh and I are here to present on a very specific project we have been working on for the past year. Technically, but it all started a few years ago through the AI for Impact program at the Burn Center for Social Change, and it's the AIEP project. The main problem or question we were trying to tackle a few years ago when we started was this question of individualized education plans, which are documents that supports children with a disability in public educations to access the services required for them to have a quality education. And those documents are very often very lengthy, more than 50 pages long. They are filled with very complex terms and language, and they become really challenging to navigate for the families that need to sign off these documents and talk to the school and teachers on the sort of services that their children will be accessing. This becomes even more difficult for families whose home language might not be English, especially given that the lexicon, the terms utilized in the documents are very complex. So we decided to approach the problem from a co-design perspective. We engaged with parents and caregivers in California with our collaborators from Innovate Public Schools, and our teams built together a free open source AI-powered tool that does basically four things. First, it translates IEPs into multiple languages. We are currently working with Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin, and we have tested the tool robustly with Spanish, and we are currently moving on to test with the other two languages. The selection of those languages is because they are the most spoken language after English in the Bay Area, the San Francisco area. The tool also simplifies complex educational jargon, so it becomes accessible for parents and caregivers. And it summarizes key information from within the documents. Beyond that, we've designed the tool in a way that it also provides key information on the IEP process for users. So beyond just the summaries and the translation, it is a tool that really empowers families to advocate for their children's education. These are some images of the focus groups and conversations we had with parents testing the tool. This was our first iteration of the platform when we were developing jointly with parents. And from the learnings from those conversations, small group conversations, we were able to identify change that would be easier for us to implement, had a medium effort of implementation, and then a really high effort of implementation, and the sort of change it required, minimal to major change. I'm very happy because we've been able to implement most of the recommendations and feedback we got from parents, from low to high and from minimal to major. And some of the changes we implemented have to do with the language in the tool. Some of the baseline questions that we had within our surveys when we were working with parents. As an example, one of the questions we had in the survey was levels of scholarity for parents. And it wasn't clear if we were referring to their education here in the US or in their home country. Changes to the prototypes navigation, so really focusing on the user experience, UX, UI. And changes on how summaries are generated, so the content. And here I'm going to pass it on to Anirudh, who will talk to us more in depth about what we did there.
Thanks, Sophia. So as Sophia mentioned, there's three things that we're trying to do with the AIEP tool. That is to summarize the IEP, make it more accessible, and then to do it in a language that parents are most comfortable in. We have a very simple workflow for parents. They can create an account either using an email and password or using their phone number if email is not something that they use, which we found during our focus groups that many of the parents don't use email at all. The tool then extracts a summary into 8 key sections, which are important for parents to know from the long IEP document. And each of these sections goes into a varying level of detail and nuance, which we co-designed with the parents. In part, what makes developing with AI sort of different from traditional software development is whether you're using traditional chat interfaces or the APIs of Claude or ChatGPT, or using agents or MCPs, under the hood, there is still a prompt. And the quality of the output that you can produce depends not just on the quality of the scaffolding and code that traditional software development relies on, but also on the quality of the prompt that's under the hood. And so even though LLMs are getting better at guessing intention and context and domain expertise, you're likely to get better results when you provide that context yourself within the prompt. And this was especially important in our case because it was clear from the start that even though newer models were doing a better job at summarizing information for us, we still didn't want the LLM to be in charge of making those decisions. And so we wanted to be in charge of making those decisions about what the key insights are that we're extracting, and not the LLM. But actually, we then realized that the people who should be in charge of making those decisions is not even us as the developers. It should be the parents who are making those decisions. And so we went back to the parents and educators and several IEP advocates through our partner networks to understand like what are the things that are important to extract and what are the challenges that we can solve. And so to me, this is the second big opportunity in developing AI product is that because the prompt is in plain language, and that plain language could be in English or in a different language, you can really open up the core of your product to the people who will benefit most from its use. And so what we did was we unboxed the prompt, as we call it. And that is to say, we loaded the prompt into a Google Doc and we shared it with parents and educators and people in our network and had them share feedback in whatever format they were most comfortable in. So they can add sort of comments in the Google Doc or just share it by voice during our focus groups or send us an email. And then there's a simple job for us to turn that feedback into a sort of more concise prompt. Which is sort of the easiest thing to do. And finally, what that also then lets us do is to get more sort of focused information into the LLM about the translations itself. So for instance, there's a lot of complex jargon, as Sophia mentioned, in IEPs. I'm just taking an example here of the term alternative dispute resolution, which one, you need to translate into the language that the parents are comfortable in. So in this case, these are just strings that you translate from English into Spanish. But also, we wanted to go one step further and sort of simplify those complex terms. So we then add a separate file that's not only doing translations, but then creating a sort of glossary that makes the complex terms into simple sort of plain language and then translates the plain language. So the goal here is not just to translate for the sake of translation, but translate really to make the document more accessible to parents. One of the other big concerns that we know, because IEPs contain so much private information and sensitive information, we design for privacy. So before we share any of the OCR sort of text from the original IEP document, we redact all personal information, including addresses, social security numbers, contact information, and then only pass on the redacted information to the LLMs for processing. So that gives us a good balance between extracting the most valuable insights that we really need from the IEP and also protecting the privacy of the students who are engaged. That's the project. And I just want to call out all of Sophia and our partners at Innovate Public School who made it possible to build this product, but also most importantly, to the parents we worked with who helped design the prompt and helped design all the sort of additional features that have made this product possible.
Wonderful. Thanks to all of you for those really inspiring and exciting presentations. I know this is also just in many ways the tip of the spear in terms of work that you have all done. And again, we have other people here with lots of expertise. So I want to encourage people again to use the chat for conversation, questions for one another to find out what each other is doing. I see we have people from all over the country and all over the world here. But let me start with some questions for our panel, if you will. And if you have questions for them, again, use the Q&A button just to flag the type of question, which will allow us to better organize the conversation. Okay, so you've told us what our goal in this part of the conversation now is to go from talking about projects to really talking about specific skills and learnings and things that people can do in their own work. So do's and don'ts, things you've learned, successes, failures. You've each shown us a lot of different projects here. Can you just extract for us kind of what the key design principles are or key lessons that emerged for you about maybe one point about what one should do and one thing about what you shouldn't do? Where should we start here? I'll go, Laruthi, we'll go in the same order that we started, and we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think maybe two things that are critical to do, not related to AI, and then how AI can help with that, and how to use AI effectively. So one, make it really easy for people to tell you what is and isn't working, and two, leverage your team members who are talking to the public every day and explaining to them and hearing where they're struggling. This applies in English, this applies in other languages. I think those are the key principles that are really critical for ensuring that you understand where people are struggling and how to communicate and guide them like through both content creation and then through the entire process. And you surface a lot of opportunities for improvements there. And then AI is an incredibly powerful tool that you can use to train, like prompt and train with those learnings and use that to, again, leverage human in the loop to scale those insights. So those are the things I would recommend doing. I think like places that I would recommend not like would really recommend taking advantage of the folks on your team. That's a really easy place to start. You can just pick up the phone and call someone. Sometimes it can be a little bit harder to figure out how to do the public engagement piece. I know there's a lot of great Innovate US workshops on this, but yeah, leverage your staff. Make sure to not cut them out of the process. And again, leverage experts at content creation to help you validate that the drafts that you're generating are helpful or if you need to improve your prompt or so on.
Sophia or Ani?
I think very much in the same sense that Ruthie was mentioning expertise. My one point was leveraging human expertise with the help of the tool. So, for example, for us in the IEP project, once we had the glossary and some of the summaries, it was really important to close a loop by just checking with human translators that some of the translations that the tool was giving us were correct, were appropriate, and check with our collaborators in California that the terms that we were using were also appropriate for that specific context. Annie, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just one additional thing to add is there is some fear around AI, AI use, but I think what we found was when we explained the technology to people and sort of instead of leading with the technology, when we lead with the sort of challenges and pain points they're facing, and then introducing the technology and explaining how it can help, we found that people's acceptance of AI and the technology is much higher than just going in and saying, here's an AI-powered tool, use it. So just the process of co-creation, I think, really helped us improve both engagement and acceptance. And that was one of the big learnings for us.
And Ani, is there anything that going into it that you wish you had known starting the project?
Oh, it's so many things, but more than anything, I think it's just the biggest learning was the value in listening, which I think we know instinctively, but it just came up again and again that just listening to what people have to say can really inform the way that we build product. And just one example was there was a point earlier this year when, as the dev team, we were trying to prioritize what features we should have in the beta. And, we were thinking, can we add single sign-on to make login easier? And should we add a chatbot so you can interact with the IEP and so on, and all of these really cool features. And we started doing the focus group sessions and very quickly realized none of that matters because that's, we're not trying to impress our users with fancy AI features. We're trying to solve a problem and they're facing a very urgent challenge. And that challenge is not just logistically about how you understand an IEP. It's the whole process. They're coming into this, very emotionally exhausting process, and everything about it is unfamiliar to them. In many cases, parents with 4-year-olds were seeing the diagnosis of their child for the first time, so they're already in very unfamiliar territory. And adding a layer of this, chatbot-y complex technology on top of that felt like it's just you're not meeting people where they are. And so just getting that perspective helped us just strip off all the frills and bells and whistles from the product and focus on what really matters. And that just came from sitting down and listening, which I think it's something that comes up in public engagement over and over again. And I think we just learned that one more time in this case.
So it's not good old-fashioned AI, it's good old-fashioned listening.
Right.
Ruthie, over the years, and you've been with the Office of Innovation now for a few years, what's the one thing you wish you would, what's the one thing you wish you had known at the outset? Do you have any of these things we did wrong stories?
I wouldn't say things we did wrong, but I think some things that went really right or it's building off of what Anya was saying a little bit, but with a slightly different framing. Some government services and experiences around accessing them are really complex to change and, are, very important to kind of validate and get right and through testing and learn. I mean, really you should test and learn as much as possible in anything you do. But some things are easier to test and learn quickly, and some things are more complex for various reasons, like getting out a new unemployment insurance application to 100% of people in New Jersey who are eligible. Like that's complex. And so with that, for example, we ended up releasing that at first to 25 people and then scaling that up. But there's some things that you can release even more quickly, like a new email that validates, like, are we explaining this concept clearly? Can we update like one piece of this website to say something more clearly and see if that changes the kinds of feedback we get? Or, if we send out this email, does that change the types of questions our call center staff are hearing? Can we talk to our call center staff frequently to hear what problems they're hearing about and see if we can get any feedback cycles from them on improvements we make? So I think like finding things that you can release improvements to very rapidly and start learning and then figure out where to invest your resources in making those improvements. I think that's like maybe the thing that really occurs to me, which I think is a little bit similar to what you were saying, Anya, and even like how you unbox the Google Doc, right? Like kind of like really simplifying it. Like what can you do right away?
Sophia, maybe let me ask you a related question and just to share, both anything that was a kind of big surprise, but also very concretely. I mean, Anna gave us an example of a feature that changed, or more specifically, a feature you got rid of, or features you got rid of. Are there specific things you can kind of point to where the community feedback really changed what you built, how you built it, or what the workflow was?
Yes, definitely. I think, well, the most concrete one was the summaries, how the summaries were generated. For example, through our conversations with parents, they told us that this was a very, very stressful process for them, and that they really disliked that when they saw the document started with just the diagnosis and jumping into some of the services and directly into these problem-solving sort of language, instead of highlighting some of the just strengths of their children and where they were doing very well. So one of the things that we implemented in our summaries is that when you see the summary, the first tab are the strengths of the child, and from then we move into the goals, the services, etc. And we got this feedback. We implemented it in quite a quick turnaround. And when we shared back in the next focus group, the parents noticed it immediately. So I think there's something that at least surprised me through this process is how beautifully the dev team was able to capture those very emotional moments and turn them into features of the tool.
So I want to like disentangle. We're really talking about three things here at the same time. One is co-designing or using engagement to co-design AI, something like the IEP tool. We're talking about using AI to co-design a service like a government benefit, as Ruthie talked about. And then we have a lot of conversations over the last few weeks about really using AI to do engagement or co-design of a policy, more sort of comments, citizen feedback, like we heard from Bowling Green or the Engaged California folks. So maybe, and all of these, here we're here to talk about sort of the opportunities for translation and multilingualism in any of this. How do you ensure that the AI outputs are going to be reliable? I asked Magnus about the reliability of the Swedish translation now of the conversation that we're having. And more specifically, does it give you pause of these three options, co-designing AI, co-designing a service, or getting feedback on a service, or getting feedback on a policy? Do you see one as being the ripe area for experimentation first? Is one more risky, less risky? And how do you, in short, what can you tell us about sort of the guardrails piece of this? Who wants to take that first?
I can start. I think what we were trying to reflect on is how translations are different from sort of traditionally Google Translate does this versus how the LLMs are doing it. And I think one key difference is just that the LLMs lack subject matter expertise and sort of what they're now calling specialized domain expertise. And it's non-deterministic by nature, which means that every time you ask it to translate something, it gives you a slightly different translation in a way that Google Translate and like traditional machine learning would not. So one of the big challenges for us in translating the IEP is because it contains so much legal terminology and medical terminology, we can't afford to deviate too much from the actual meaning of the phrases that were used. And the guardrails we implement there is to have a sort of either a human generated or a human verified kind of list of technical terms that are translated very accurately. And that becomes the input to the LLM. I just out of personal interest, I've tried translating sentences into my native language, into Malayalam. And so one of the weird things that happens, it's a small thing, but it's important, is if you translate a sentence like, this applicant should not be eligible for benefits if a discrepancy is discovered, the LLM sometimes translates it as there may be a reduced possibility of receiving benefits, which sounds the same, but there's a sort of softening of the shall not into a may be reduced. And that could be the difference between someone getting a service and not getting a service. So I think it's probably more ripe to, like situations where we're trying to do public engagement and we're trying to do outreach and create promotional materials and create the sort of less technical materials for outreach, and also inwards. So when you're trying to get feedback from people in multilingual situations or multimodal situations, those are the two use cases, I think, where the LLMs are sort of ready to use out of the box. And then as you get to the more technical use cases, we have to add many more guardrails to make sure that it's doing the translations correctly.
I can add some thoughts here as well. So
Please, Ruthie, jump in.
fortunately, the baseline, and this is not just related to multi-language access, but it is also quite related. Like the baseline is often nothing, right? Like the baseline is like only English language content, and then you can maybe use an automated browser translation to translate. So between nothing and something that, is not as good as what a human translator would generate if we had human translators who translate every part of the New Jersey government experience for all the communities we serve, I think, often like something that's a step in that direction is really helpful. I think it's really critical to do a risk assessment of what you're translating, who you're providing this service to, et cetera, where LLM supported translation can be helpful. Obviously, I talked about this extensively, but using human translators and your staff, members of the public to help you validate and learn, figuring out how you get those fast feedback loops. And I think broadly, this is one of the principles that really underpins our work at the New Jersey Office of Innovation. The more you can help more people self-serve, the more capacity you can clear up for people who need more hands-on support, people in more vulnerable populations who, would benefit from being able to get through to a call center staff, to go to a field office. So you really clear out more capacity for those people to help people who do need that hands-on support. So I think it's sort of like a mix of these different principles that come together in our work.
Sophia, anything else you want to add here about also this question of whether, in your experience, there are places where we just cannot give up the human element, or places if we have limited resources to invest, and there's a good question coming in about limited resources, which we'll get to. Here's where we should be investing in the humans, and here's where we can use AI. Humans meaning translators, other kinds of technical assistance providers. And I should say, Sophia, let me just give one shout out, because in addition to this project, Sophia, I forgot to say at the outset, has a long background as a government innovator in the lab for Mexico City, which we should have said about you at the outset. So whether it's from doing work for the government of Mexico City or whether it's doing this work on the IEP project in California.
I think maybe not so much about translation per se, But there's definitely something about a cultural connection to how they are interpreting what they're reading and the information they're accessing. Um, for us in the AIEP project, it was incredibly important to have parents working very closely with us, because they were also giving us certain cues on, yes, how to input words and terms into the LLM for translation. But I'm just thinking about a very simple example. We have a section in the tool that is called Know Your Rights, so that they have access to information to advocate for their children's education. And the way that we were translating it in a very sort of quote unquote correct Spanish way that was approved by our collaborators, by myself as a native Spanish speaker, and the way that it was just translated by the LLM was culturally very aggressive, according to parents. So we had to kind of tone down some of the language in that section, because they did not want to feel this kind of combative sense in the vocabulary used. So I think regarding resources, it's of course investing in the technology to support translation and human translators, etc., but also those community connectors, as our parents in California, that can just inform us of these sort of nuances.
So we have a question from an anonymous participant in the chat, and I want to bring that into the next question I want to ask. So let me ask it in sort of in two parts. The question is for practitioners who are watching today, for people, and again, our goal with these sessions is to inspire and help more people to do more engagement. What is the most realistic entry point for integrating AI into their multilingual outreach? And the question we have in the chat is sort of brings up the political moment in which we exist, in which there has been a deprioritization of official political pronouncements that oppose the use of multilingual content, that oppose policies or sort of attempt to overturn policies we previously had that prioritized multilingual content, without getting into debates about wokeness and DEI and equity and whatnot. There has, across the board, there's been a sort of deprioritization, and therefore, presumably with that, a lack of budget for doing multilingual translation and other kinds of multilingual engagement in many jurisdictions, or there just isn't a budget, full stop, because there never was. So practically speaking, entry points. What can people do tomorrow? And again, in any of these three areas, building AI, co-designing a service, co-designing or getting impact or input on a policy, some really just practical points. And yes, listening, sure. But where do we start with AI and AI tools? What do you want to recommend to people? Maybe, Ani, let me start with you. Help us here just technically how we think about what tools we can use. And then Ruthie, maybe I'll pass it to you to say a little bit about how we access AI in New Jersey and what that means for people there.
I think one of the easiest things that we can start immediately is to translate sort of promotional materials and marketing materials and things that are just about outreach and informing people about their rights or benefits that they're eligible for and so on, and just increasing the base of people who can, sort of learn more about their rights just by learning about it in the language they're comfortable in. And you could do that using any of the LLMs that are out there. So you could use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and just upload whatever one pager you have, and it will translate it into a language of your choice. And in fact, it can even help make the language simpler. It will, to what Sophia was saying and what Ruthie was saying, need some level of human oversight just to make sure everything's accurate. But again, to Ruthie's point, it's so much better than nothing. And it does a really, really good job, especially the more recent advancements in the LLMs. And the second thing I'll add is from the community engagement perspective. I remember a few years ago, if we were trying to prototype a new community engagement platform or tool, the easiest non-tech thing you could do was to create a Google form and just put in a text box and hope people respond to it. There are now tools out there, including Claude and ChatGPT's sort of coding abilities that let people with very limited dev knowledge create pilots and prototypes of tools for engagement. So if you have an idea for creating a platform for community engagement and there's a specific set of features you want, but you don't know whether it works or not, it's way easier than it was 5 years ago to set up a prototype and just try it with a small group of users and see what works and what doesn't. So I think those two things are probably the immediate things that you could try tomorrow.
Ruthie, over to you, and then Sophie.
So I think there's a few really great points that you brought up, Beth and Ani. So AI can help us do human-centered multilingual access efficiently, which is really important in this moment. In terms of what I would do tomorrow, I would choose one email or web page. Feel free to use our translation guides or prompts. Put that into whatever AI assistant you have access to in your environment, and translate like one email, one web page using those prompts, using those guides, and see how you can evaluate. You can run that by a multilingual member of your staff. In this moment, language access is both the right thing to do, but it also drives efficiency. It saves money, it saves time. So that's step one. Step two, if you have the ability, I would definitely recommend adding something like our feedback widget to a site you control. If possible, I wouldn't want to drive without a mirror, right? Similarly, I wouldn't want to do this work without a way to get immediate feedback and make improvements, and then so you can figure out how the improvements you're making drive impact or not. And then three, related to that, collecting data and reporting it back is really key. People may or may not value multi-language access, but they will definitely understand things like 70% reduction in support calls on a specific issue based on user feedback, hundreds of thousands of dollars saved a year, things like that. So multi-language access can drive those metrics that everybody can align on and understand, even if someone needs a little bit more prompting to figure out why that is important to them. Sophia, I'll pass it on to you.
I think everything that Ani and Ruthie have said is kind of what I was thinking. More from a design perspective, I was thinking just using some of the already existing tools out there to create clickable prototypes, very easy clickable prototypes that are easy to translate in multiple languages to do user testing. They're just great, and it takes not more than an hour. It's very, very easy.
So welcome if there are any follow-up questions to that. Very, very easy. I think there's a question from Jacqueline. I don't know if she wants to come off mute. I can't see everybody to ask her question. So maybe, in the interest of time, I'll ask it for her. Sorry?
I took myself off mute if you want.
Oh, you good. Oh, yes. Ask your question, please. Thank you.
So I was asking if the IEP projects were shared with other states. So for instance, I live in New York City, and I know, for instance, a friend who's a social worker at a private school, and they use the public school IEP process as well. It's not just for the public schools, like the private schools, at least in New York City, use them as well. So I was thinking, just, kind of listening to you guys, like, oh, plenty of people go between New York and New Jersey on a daily basis. I wonder if they've shared it with like the New York City or New York State Department of Education and, the other 48 states that aren't New York and New Jersey. That's all.
I can answer that. So we've mostly worked in California, in the Bay Area, with communities in San Francisco and San Jose. And we have trained the tool with the IEP templates that are utilized specifically in California. But we have collaborators that have tested the tool with IEPs from other places, other states, and it does generate very good, accurate summaries as well. So I think our aim is definitely to grow and to get the tool to as many parents as we can, because we just see it as a way for them to really be able to advocate for themselves. And just as I was reading on the chat, some parents have to even hire or get educational advocates, and so it just really levels the ground and closes kind of an equity gap there. Annie, I don't know if you want to add anything about the translations and summaries.
No, I think as Sophia mentioned, the tool works across contexts, but because our focus grouping was limited to San Francisco, there's a lot of tweaks we made to the translations and glossary specifically that's kind of geared towards San Francisco. Our goal would be and we'd love to expand this to all states. We're free and open source, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible can get access to it. But as we enter different states and different cities, we just want to make sure that the tool is tweaked appropriately for the context in which it's being developed, and make sure that the terminology is similar and consistent, and that even the sections that we're extracting from and the sort of rights we display and things like that are tuned to that jurisdiction. So we'd love to expand it, and we're sort of in conversation with many different states at the moment.
So wait, if I could just answer one thing. I'm sorry that I said New Jersey. It's because I was looking at Ruthie's background that said NJ. I was paying attention. I know you did it in California. And I think it was whoever presented first said like their slides would be available. Like, is someone going to make all the slides available? So maybe I could share with my friend, because I honestly have no personal connection, but like if I shared some of this, she might be able to get in touch with, like, how would that be possible? Thank you.
Great. So we share all the past workshops are shared on the workshops page where you signed up. The video and resources, it'll all be there. And we are doing a workshop just about the IEP project as part of our education series. So I'll shift us off of that for the moment. It's such a fabulous project, but it's with the education specific element will be coming up in January. Tim in Connecticut, jump on in.
Hi, thanks so much. I mean, incredible work in both presentations. I don't mean to stay IEP focused. I did spend a few years in school administration in New York City, so I understand just how crucial IEP registration is. I guess my question would be, do you guys anticipate or see like additional versions of this sort of service also going from the other direction? Who are the teachers or the administrators that can also register, not necessarily on their students' behalf, but like what can schools be doing so that we could be coming from both directions? So if we're able to help parents sort of register for IEPs, a huge, as noted in the chat, like there's still a big gap between I've successfully registered my student and like the school provides the services and it was effective, right? And so just thinking through about like almost like the reverse direction of like a tool where schools can sort of register and say how much of their IEP supports are available or what sort of funding they need given how many students have registered, and sort of bringing the two sides together. Perhaps something that you've thought about at length, but I'm simply thinking about what we can do as non-parents to also facilitate services like this. And this is, you know, I think a good like example of also other services where it's like we might not be able to do this on behalf of minors, but the providers also have an opportunity to like register or, you know, pre-enroll, make themselves more transparent and available. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Annie, do you want to answer this one with some of the features that we've thought of for the future? And this is a great idea. Thank you, Tim, so much for.
So I think there's two answers there, and again, without going too much off topic, I'm happy to connect separately, Tim. The first is that we've heard from parents repeatedly that one of the most helpful features would be to upload IEPs from successive years and see sort of student progress and whether they got the services they were eligible for in the previous year and so on. That obviously helps parents, but what we spoke to a lot of educators and sort of school district administrators, and what they told us was if parents already know that information and they come prepared sort of knowing that, then the IEP meeting goes so much more smoothly, both for the parents as well as for the teachers and administrators. And so there's just some implicit value in the parents coming prepared with this tool. The second part of like, what can the school do? I think there's a whole separate conversation about sort of the IEP authoring tools, which could potentially already help the school and administrators and teachers create these summaries from the get-go. You know, while they're creating this 80-page PDF, can it spit out a one-page summary that just makes it easier for everybody? And because they already have that data within the school, can they have some sort of analytics dashboard? Which that's not a side of it we've explored so far, but it's a great idea, and I think it's totally worth considering.
In the interest of time, since we have 5 minutes left, and I want to be sure that we, again, we will have something just about the AIEP project coming up in January, and that'll be announced shortly. I want to just have us wrap up on the general questions about AI and engagement and fostering multilingual forms of participation. And so just a last kind of question for all three of you. Is your greatest hope that AI is going to help us increase the scale of how many people we reach, to widen the lens of whom we reach, or to deepen the quality of engagement? So just a last chance to kind of reflect on the question at hand.
I think
or
for
any
me,
last final practical advice for people?
I think for me, all of the above. It's been incredibly powerful to see parents engage with the prompts, with AI. So I think it's, yes, but also kind of the going deep with the technology. The way that we've heard them present this project to board school members, to the superintendent of San Francisco, is just really wonderful to see how kind of confident they feel and how much the technology has supported them in understanding better a process that was before extremely, extremely stressful for them.
I think for me, the way I'd answer it is that the work we do is so incredibly important and impactful, and government and public sector should be using all the tools available in our toolkit in a responsible way and leveraging emerging technology in a thoughtful way so we can do this work better, faster, more effectively, more efficiently. We often operate in, complex environment for a lot of reasons we're not going to get into in the next 3 minutes. We were really lucky to work with Innovate US to pilot the responsible AI for public sector training in July 2024. That's been incredibly impactful in New Jersey. So again, thinking about how we take advantage of technology to support this work is incredibly important. And Ani, I'll pass on to you.
Yeah, I'm not too obsessed with scale, to be honest. I'm not. My frustration was never that we don't get 1 million active users on public engagement platforms. I think the frustration has always been that we don't get to enough communities who don't speak English or who don't use are not comfortable typing their response into a long survey. And, that's always been the frustration. And I think to that extent, the fact that all of these AI tools are multimodal and let people respond in a language of their choice in either voice or text or however, like written notes. And we now have the ability to sort of parse all of that equally easily. I think that, and as a consequence of that, scale might increase. But I think it's the ability now to sort of widen, Beth, as you put it, to sort of widen the lens and deepen the quality of engagement, I think is the thing that's most exciting for me. And scale will be a consequence.
Ani, with 30 seconds, this is relevant to something that was said in the chat. Should we be focused on text, or are we minutes away from just letting people talk at us and using some of the tools we've heard about to understand better what they're telling us?
I think we're already there. I think we're there. What we didn't get to enough was just which languages the LLMs are good at. Obviously, English, Spanish, sort of European languages largely are so oversampled on the internet, and therefore are much better at translating both live through text, voice, and so on. Whereas I'm from India. There's a lot of regional languages in India that are good, but like not as good in terms of the quality of translation. And there are efforts that are going on to sort of crowdsource improving the LLMs to improve the quality of translations for these sort of less digital languages, let's say. And I think that will really push this movement forward, where we can immediately go towards voice, and for many languages we're already there.
Fantastic. Thanks to all of you. Per our usual plan, we get you out of here timely within an hour. For those who want to stick around for a few more minutes and just enjoy virtual wine and cheese, we will open things up and keep the Zoom open for a few minutes after this. But let me remind everybody that we have one more event in this series, which is next week with Audrey Tang, Cyber Ambassador, former Minister of Digital Affairs of Taiwan, together with me and with Danielle Allen, wrapping up the series and sharing some of our learnings. That will be December 18th at an unusual time. To accommodate Taiwan, we will be at 10 a.m. on December 18th as our last session before the holidays. Thank you to Sophia and to Ruthie and to Ani. Everything is shared openly afterwards. Look out for the page. Thank you to the Innovate US team for running this, and thanks to all of you for coming. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
So for those who want to leave, please do. I am unfortunately in that category. For those who want to stick around, if there were questions.